Okay, we are back with the Q&A session for the second day of the test stream, the Intro to C. Basically, this is the Q&A session for what we talked about a little bit about basically creating space for values, how things are encoded as values, and how assembly language works with them in order to set the stage for tomorrow, where we are going to start looking in detail at exactly how code executes on the CPU. So let's take a look. All right, I am going to catch up on the chat. Let's see. We're talking about Rust here a little, so let's see. Two's compliment. He's going to read our flame war about compute our languages. No, I'm not going to read your flame war. You know what? I will say that I really like doing this series, even though I've only done it twice now. I love doing it. I'm hoping to get better at get better at explaining things and everything, but I'm always very positive on it and happy because I'm so enjoying doing it. But I am just like everyone else when it comes to flame wars. I'm sure that if I were in the Twitch chat, I would be flaming. So I'm not going to read your flame war, but I know where you guys are at. I know about the flame wars. They happen. What can you do? So you said, okay, Idiocracy says, Casey, you mentioned earlier that Windows requires both a line feed and a carriage return to probably move on to the next line, and that we can type this ourselves in source code with two escape codes, \n. If that's the case, how come I can use a printf statement in Windows with \n without any mention of \r and the output is formatted correctly? That is a fabulous question, and it's something that I may never get to in the mainstream because we may not need to know. I probably will, but so I'm going to actually answer that fully right now. It's not that complicated. Okay, so what actually happens, and I don't actually, you know what? Maybe we can even go on a little adventure here. I don't know. I don't know if you guys are in the mood for an adventure, but we could go on a little adventure if we wanted to. So if I type in, he was asking about printf, and printf is a thing in C that basically is part of the standard library. We're going to talk about what the standard library is later. And we're going to talk about why it sucks too, but we're going to talk about the standard library. And the standard library defines some things that we can do. Printf is a thing that prints out to a console. So if you're writing a console application, which we are not, I talked about that at the very beginning of the very first one of these. I said we're building and not a console application. But if you were building it and you were running it from one of these guys, a command prompt, when you ran it, it would basically print out what you put in here out to the command prompt. So it's kind of like output debug string, but it's actually user-facing. It comes out to the user's command prompt. What I want to know is the standard library source code installed? Survey says, yes, it is. Okay. So if we actually go into printf here, and this is kind of, again, part of the theme of the series, always know what's going on. Printf is something that someone else wrote. And if we want to see what it does, we should step on in there to it. And so we can kind of see by going through the debugger, there's a bunch of C code in here. We're going to open the argument list. We're going to do some stuff with, it's going to try to do a try except block to try and figure out if anyone's going to crash in there. It's going to do an output. What's going on here? IOFunc. Here we are in a crazy function. This is probably the actual meat of printf, I would guess. Is it actually going in here? Yes, it is. Here we go. It's doing all of the cases it needs to do for printf. Yeah, you can see there's all kinds of good stuff in here. Here's the different format codes. All right, so this is basically the source code to printf in the Microsoft edition of Visual C++. And what you can see in here is it's going to go through all the string, and it's going to do tons of code to try and figure out what you typed in there. And I don't know if I want to actually try to find it specifically in here, because I don't actually know how it's encoded, and it might take a while. I'm just doing a quick scan to see if it jumps out at me. It's a little hard to do that while I'm talking, of course, because it's code that I've never seen before. But basically, I wanted to see if it showed what happened when it got to the \n, because that would be relevant to us. Now, I didn't see it there, and I suspect they've encoded it separately. Yeah. All right. So unfortunately, I can't pinpoint the exact code for you. But, well, you know what? Let's not give up yet. I said we were going to go on an adventure, and so, you know what? An adventure takes some time sometimes. Why rush the adventure? I'm just going to print out just the \n. So the very first thing that happens in our printf is going to be that. So let's see what it does. Shall we? I think we shall. Let's go on in here and let's see what we do. We are going to handle locales, always good. In case you're at some kind of foreign locale, we're going to get some stuff formatted, and we have gotten ourselves into position. Look at that. CH, the thing that they are processing in this loop. We haven't covered loops yet, but hey, the thing we're processing in this loop. Sometimes in the Q&A, when you go on an adventure, you just got to jump forwards. You got to jump forwards. There's that 10. That's the \n we were talking about. Let's see how it handles it. It's going into the switch statement about its current state. Then it's going to check some things. It's going to do a write char directly on that. So our write char statement looks like where we need to be. What happens in here? It is going to call into yet another function. Oh, sweet mercy. Will we ever actually write a piece of code? Let's see, written account, IR write, setting the flags. Trying not to accidentally skip forwards as we go. And it is going to set that. If not defined Unicode, it's going to set stream base. And then we are going to return ch and 0 now. Okay, so I don't actually know why this is going to be a little more complicated than I thought. I had hoped I might be able to point you to a very smoking gun there, which was basically like a place where it actually did the translation, but I don't think I'm going to be able to find it for you. So I'm sorry. I wanted to go on an adventure. I thought maybe it would pay off, but I feel like it might take a little too long. So I don't want to belabor that point too much. I will simply tell you what the answer is. If we continue to step through this, we could find it actually doing where it translates out that stream base, which I don't know exactly where in their code they actually do that, because as you might imagine, I don't spend a lot of time looking at Microsoft's implementation of printf. The answer of why you can do that is because C tried to solve the problem for you, the multi-platform problem. So what I said was basically you've got Windows, it wants \r\n, Linux, or operating system from Europe, just wants a \n. I believe Mac just wants \r. I don't even, Mac's even something else, I think, back in the old days, but nowadays I think since they're Unix underneath, they may just adhere to the Unix standard now. So I said this, and someone in the chat, actually, Idiocracy, brought up the fact that how is he able to, he programs in C obviously, or has tried programming in C somewhat, how is he able to put a \n when Windows wants a \r \n, which is what I said? Am I lying to you? I would not lie to you. It really does want a \r \n. The reason that works is because C tried to solve this problem for you. It tried to basically make it so that it didn't matter what platform you're running on, the same code would still work. So when you type this in, although it always gets translated into that 10, the actual printf call, when the stream itself is getting output to the console under the hood in the code that you didn't write, in the code that's in the C runtime library that's executing the printf, it will actually look for the \n's, the 10s, and translate them into \r \n. Now, fun fact, this is why if you go to look at, and I'm just assuming that you know this because you were asking me a question about printf, if you go look at the signature for fopen, the thing that opens a file in the C runtime library, you will note that it takes something called a mode, and that mode has some interesting aspects to it. There's a thing called B that you can put on the mode which says open the file in binary mode. So why would I have to open a file in binary mode? Isn't everything a computer binary? What's the difference between opening in binary mode and not opening it in binary mode, right? Well, the answer is because C tried to solve the line feed problem. And so what it did is it decided that it would actually go through and it would translate all of those into the correct one for the platform. So if it sees \n, it would translate it into \n on Unix, just a pass-through, or \r \n if it was on Windows. Now the problem with that is that if you were trying to write something in binary that was actually just data. Like if you were trying to save data to a file and you tried to write it out, the stream itself will actually translate the binary code. So you might try to write the value 10. You had nothing to do with the string. Like you're trying to write out the fact that the guy has 10 hit points. And it will mess that up for you, and it'll mess it up for you in a really hard to deal with way because it'll actually insert another character. So now your data is all messed up. And so what you have to do when you open a file that you want to write binary directly to that isn't supposed to be text, something that's not supposed to be text, you have to tell the stream that you're writing in binary. And so you may have encountered this bug where you accidentally forgot the binary when you opened a file that you were writing to, and you tore your hair out. You were like, I'm writing this stuff to the file, and then I try to load the file, and it's broken. What's going on? Well, that's what's going on. It's translating it for you. And then you're like, oh, I forgot to add binary. You add binary, and everything works. So that's what that is. It's basically these functions have that built in. Now, output debug string also accepts \n. So that's why I didn't have to put a \r/n here. But if we were to write actual directly, if we were actually directly writing to the console or actually directly writing to a text file on Windows, we would have to put the \r/n ourselves. Hopefully that answers that question. Okay, let's take a look here. Is it possible to write Win32 apps assuming UTF-8, or must you always use wide UTF-16? To be honest with you, I don't think there's really any way to write UTF-8. You can write your app in UTF-8, which a lot of people do, and it's what I would do. But then you always, when you talk to Windows, you have to have a little piece of code that like shimmies it out, that basically like, you know, converts the UTF-8 to UTF-16. It's really tedious and unfortunate, but that's the way it works. They may have added some things with like Windows 8 or stuff to do native UTF-8 or something, but I ain't touching Windows 8, so I have no idea. I don't really know if they added that there, but no, for the most part, under the hood, you actually always have to turn back to UTF-16, but you probably don't want to write your actual code that way. You probably just want to deal with that at the end of the day, since Windows is the only people who do that. Someone was asking why I use .cpp if I write in pure C. Is there an advantage, or are you used to it? So the reason is because I might show some C++ stuff. I might show how to do some operator overloading, for example. The reason that I call it programming in C is because mostly I won't be doing much in the way of C++. So if you were trying to really learn C++, I don't want to do false advertising and tell you you're going to learn C++ because you're not. We're not going to really cover templates. We're not going to cover inheritance. We're not going to cover a lot of the things that you would do, lambdas in C++. We're going to stick to basic C code. But I compile as .cpps because A, that's what most people use. Even when they program in C, a lot of people will use .cpps just because there's some things that they might want to use in C++. And also because really C is easy to compile in CPP. Most things you can do in C are accepted by the C++ compiler, so it's pretty easy to do so. So yeah, I really am programming this game in C++, and we might use some C++ while we program it. It's just that I'm not really going to be teaching much of C++, and so I didn't want to give people the expectation that they would be learning C++ because they really won't. They're mostly learning C. Someone asked, folks frequently write unsigned char in addition to char unsigned. Are there landmines there to watch out for? The answer is no, not really. And so what was being asked there by Dr. Jeets was basically that if I were to take this unsigned here and move it to here, that is actually still totally legal C. It does not actually care where you put the unsigned qualifier. The unsigned, it's called a CV qualifier. Oh, no, it's not. Never mind. That's probably the type name. It's not C. Const volatile things go after that. Forget I ever said that. It's not CV qualifier. CV qualifier comes later. It's just part of the type, and the type can actually be in either order. I do not actually know. I focus a lot on coding and what actually works for coding. And there were times in my life when I got pretty intimate with things like the parsing of the language and things like that, and knowing stuff like where that came from historically. I've kind of forgotten most of it now. So I'm actually a bad person to ask for, like, say, the historical reason why that's true. The fact that I even said CV qualifier just then, just to tell you that I'm reaching back into a part of my brain that I don't access very often, and I'll make misstatements or say the wrong thing when I try to talk about some of the origin stuff. So I don't know the historical reason for that. I don't know the historical reason why you can say char unsigned. I believe you can also just say signed char as well instead of just char, and that works fine too, I think. Oops. Did that compile properly? Yes. So Yeah, so there's a lot of ways you can write the same thing, and really all that matters is that you have signed or unsigned in there or nothing, and that you have then the type value, and they all will boil down to the same thing. So I don't think there's anything to watch out for there. It's personal preference, whichever one you want. There may be pedants out there who want to tell you one is right and one is wrong, or one's more convenient, or whatever. If that's the way you feel about it, that's totally fine. I couldn't care less which way they come. Let's see. Don't appear on your stream. Oh no, the tooltips don't appear. Oh, I'm gonna write that down as something to see if I can fix. I want to kind of get maybe an outboard recording box at some point if one of them exists, so that I know that everything I see on the screen that you can see, because it's just using OBS right now, and I don't know if there's some things that won't work, and I don't want to get in situations where I'm like running the game and people can't see the game running or things like that. So yeah. So let's see. Casey, do you plan to eventually talk about the effect optimizations can have on the ASM output of the compiler? Absolutely, AndyBoy223. We will absolutely be doing that. And in fact, one of the things that I will be doing at the end of this little intro stream, probably this weekend, the main show will be weekdays only, but this stream is going to be this weekend as well, because I want to really refine the stream and get really good at doing the explanations before the first official cast on Monday. One of the things I'll be doing is showing you how to compile from the command line, and I will start talking about what those options are and what they do. Let's see. Print about get the debug menu while debugging. Resource that you recommend. Do you have resources that you'd recommend for practicing learning more about assembly? Not really, unfortunately. I will be going through most of it on the stream and explaining most of it to the extent that you will need to know in order to be an effective C programmer. Now, if you want to be someone who actually programs in raw assembly and not just little spots of assembly, like what I'll do is I'll write a few things in assembly when I need them to be really fast. And oftentimes I can even do that by using things that the C compiler has built in, so you don't actually really have to write assembly. You can actually write in sort of a pseudo assembly that it will do some things like register allocation for you and all this sorts of thing. So I will be explaining what you need to know. But if you actually want to go be a real assembly dude, and that's not me, right? Like you're actually talking about being hardcore about assembly language. I do not know the proper references for that. If someone out there is a hardcore assembly guy, if Jeff Roberts is listening, or Sean Barrett, old school guys who do the assembly language codings, if they want to send some resources in, I would love to post them. But I am the wrong guy to ask, and I would probably just tell you the wrong thing. What else do we have? That would help learn. Is it same boost? Mac OS X is now Unix, etc., etc. Sorry, I apologize for missing some questions here. If you want to, one thing that might be good is to put @CMuratori before, or @HandmadeHero, one or the other, before the, if you have a specific question, so I can jump to them really quickly and not miss anything. Let's see. From scratch, do you mean starting with 0 lines of code and making no use of any other code other than what the native operating system provide? Yes, that is correct. So you're saying audio, graphics, basic data structures, etc. Yes, so all of that is true. We will not be using any libraries. Every last thing that shows up on the screen that you hear through the speakers will be written by us, and the only things that we will be using that exist out in the wild are basically a little tiny bit of the C runtime library, because the compiler makes it very hard to get rid of it. In the old days, I would have actually gotten rid of it for you and showed you how to do it without the C runtime library at all, even though almost no one ever does that in practice. I think I'm one of the only people who ever shipped a product that did that. And that's not true. I'm sure there's tons of people who do, but in a modern era, I was probably one of the few people who ever tried to do that. Granny could, the 3D animation library at RAD could compile without the C runtime library. And the tools that it shipped compiled without the C runtime library as well. But ignoring that, we will only be using the facilities of Windows itself, and we will only be using the most limited versions of those. So we will not be using Windows Graphics API at all. We will basically only be using Windows to get our bits to the screen. That's it. So my goal with the series is to teach you how to do absolutely everything from scratch except the operating system, basically. And hey, man, I'd love to do that part too, but it's hard to do that on modern computers because there's so much you have to do. We'll see, maybe on the Raspberry Pi. I've been thinking about maybe doing it on the Raspberry Pi. So when the series is over, it may be time for a slice of pie, if you know what I mean. Anyway, moving on. I think I answered the C++ question. You probably answered that, but why are you using Windows.h? So I think we covered why I'm using Windows.h, but at the risk of spoilering something, I will say that we are only temporarily using Windows.h. Windows.h may go away sooner than you think. Come maybe 5 or 6 days into the stream, into the real official stream, Windows H may disappear. But the reason I was using Windows.h is because I needed to call output debug string, which is a Windows function, and the way you call Windows functions is you include their prototypes, which are in Windows.h. Let's see. We are going to use, Warknall asked if we're going to use .h or .hpp. I usually use .h. I don't know why. I don't care if people use .hpp if they want to. That's fine too, but I always use .h. Let's see. So we're using CVP even it's pure C. Do you find parts of C++ standard library? Okay, Johan Oferstedt. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Do you find any parts of the C++ standard library useful, Casey, like standard sort, standard find, and the like? No! I loathe the C++ standard library. It is the worst. It is like the antithesis of how I would like code to work, and I do not touch that with a 10-foot pole. Now, I admit that if you do not have your own standard library that you have built up over the years that do things like sorting and stuff like that for you, then I admit that it may be tempting to use it, and it may actually be more efficient to use it if you're just doing something really quickly and don't have time to build something else. It may be quicker to use a standard library because it does have a lot of stuff in there, but oh man, if you are serious about programming, do not touch that thing. It is a nightmare. Everything it does just complicates your life in a number of ways, whether it's from bloating your compile time, bloating your executable, being hard to debug, being hard to read, causing tons of extra typing that didn't need to be there. It's awful. And it all goes hand in hand with the fact that I think C++ really dropped the ball on metaprogramming. The fact that they lean on templates to do that is just ridiculous, and templates they're designed poorly. It's a nightmare, and I'm a metaprogramming aficionado. I don't really even write programs anymore. Handmade Hero is going to be one of the only programs that I write probably ever in the future that is not a metaprogram. I do a lot of metaprogramming nowadays when I write code, and it just breaks my heart to try and program in C with the standard library, because it's the worst metaprogramming language I've ever seen. I can't stand it. So no, I don't touch that stuff with a 10-foot pole. I don't really want to argue about it necessarily because, honestly, if you can make it work effectively for you, great, go for it. I can't stand it, and I really don't like code bases that use it, so I really tend to stay away from it, and I will constantly be advocating against it. But that does not mean that there can't be people who make effective use of it, and then does not mean there are people who won't be comfortable with it. So, one of the things that's true is when I say something sucks, or when I say something that I don't like or don't use, that's just talking about me personally, what I've found to be effective. If you find the opposite to be true, then that's just a different way of programming that you've learned, and just be very sure that you're actually right about it for you. Don't just believe something because somebody else says it, but if you're sure that you're right about it for you, then you are right. What makes you effective and what makes you efficient at coding is the right thing for you to do. And it's not going to be the same. Even among very, very good programmers, I have seen code from lots of different great programmers in my lifetime. I've been fortunate enough to work with great programmers and see how they write code. No two people write code the same way. There are some things that seem to be true among really great programmers that I've seen. I'd be like, yeah, okay, their code seems to adhere to a couple of things that are true. But on the whole, there's a lot of varying ways in which they work. And so I wouldn't get too hung up on anything like, should you use a standard library, shouldn't you, or whatever. The principles that I'll be teaching in Handmade Hero as it goes forward are more about how you determine what works well, how you determine if you should use a standard library. And I'm not going to tell you whether you should use a standard library. I'm going to say that I don't want to use it, but I'm not going to tell you not to use it. I'm going to tell you how to figure out that you shouldn't use it. And then if you go through those steps that I say and you look at how I say to analyze something, you may come to a different conclusion. Because it's kind of like, it's at some level, it's a bit of an art form, right? Coding is. I may say, here are the steps I used to come to that conclusion. You may do those same steps and go, no, I found that I was efficient when I did these steps. I tried some of these things and it did result in code that I could read well. It did do these things. And so I will harp more on the steps that I think are true and that are universal that you should be going through and the mindset that you should have. But the outcome of those is different, and each person, depending on how their brain works and depending on how they code, is going to have a different opinion. So, and that's fine. And as blustery as I may ever get about code things, in my heart, I always believe that someone should be able to come to a different conclusion than me, and they should be able to yell at me about it, and I should be able to yell back at them about it. But that's okay. Takes all types. Let's see what we've got here. All the code and debugging. What do you plan to use for graphics if you aren't planning using libraries such as OpenGL? Do you want me to spoil the surprise? Pagan Heart? Do you really want me to spoil the surprise? I will basically be showing you how to program by doing all of your own rendering, calling absolutely no windows whatsoever until you have done absolutely everything yourself, all in your own code. At the very last minute, we'll just be using Windows to basically say, here is a block of memory that we've put the graphics in that we wanted. Just copy those colors, like literally a bitmap we will have in memory, copy that to the screen. That is the only thing that Windows will do for us. The same is true for audio. We will basically do all of the audio ourselves until we get to the very end, and then we will basically tell Windows, take just that and play it out the speaker, please. Let's see, what type of game will this be? What type of game will this be? That I'm going to wait till the mainstream to answer. I will simply say that it will be a game about adventuring, sort of an action-adventure-y game. Let's see. I'm just going to say the same thing. Question. Is saturated addition logically equivalent to clamp? Well, so Dr. Jeets, yes and no. What I would say about saturated addition is it is sort of like clamp if you assume that the clamp can happen in a space that's bigger than what you had. So for example, if you remember here, I had 255 and then I added 1 to it and it became 0. So the problem there is if I were to try doing the clamp after this to clamp it to 255, it's too late because it already wrapped back to 0. But if I do that computation, like in the register, it was doing the computation in a bigger space that can support bigger numbers, does the addition first, then does the clamp to 255, that would work. So it's logically equivalent in that sense, but you have to make sure that you don't overflow the value before you do the clamp. Otherwise, they're the same. Paul 6, will we be creating a scripting language so that we don't have to write crappy C++ headers when we want to add objects to our game? Paul 6, we will not be writing a scripting language. We will be writing everything in C, and the reason that we will be writing everything in C is because we are going to try and make everything just a little bit more dynamic than if you were to try and do a scripting language for it. But if we get to a point where we really need something like that, I'd be happy to show you how to code a scripting language. It's just there's a lot of work involved there that I don't know how relevant it is to the actual kind of programming I'm trying to teach. But if we find that we need to do that, or somehow this goes more quickly, I'm imagining it will take months to go through all these things because I have to teach each individual thing. So even something that I know would only take me a day to go implement is going to take many days to implement because I want to make sure I explain it. So I would probably like to avoid doing a scripting language if I could, just because that's sort of a separate thing. But hey, maybe, eventually we get there. We could do that, sure. Will we be getting into sockets netcode? No, I'm definitely not going to do netcode. Again, I'm just kind of trying to cut that out. What I want to do is focus on something, what's the minimum set that we can do to still make a great game, but not take too much time. And so there's a lot of great games out right now that are 2D, local co-op only, or local single player only, but that are still awesome. And so what I want to do is focus on making a game that's awesome, but within those constraints. And the reason for that is because I'd rather go deeper than going wider. So I don't want to take 7 years of your life to listen to this series, and which I could cover all the stuff like netcode and that stuff, or scripting languages, for example. I don't really want to force that issue. But certainly, based on the response, if this series keeps being as popular as it seems to be already, with the number of people who are showing up to watch these, then I'll just keep doing them ad infinitum. I mean, I can spare an hour a night to just keep going, or 2 hours a night at this point, I guess, with the Q&A sessions. And so we could just keep adding stuff to it after it's done. If we're like, hey, yep, we finished, it's a good game, let's add netcode, I'm totally fine with that. But I just think it'll take us so long to go through everything. If I really do a good job explaining it, I think it'll take us so long to go through it that we need to pare down to just what's necessary to make a great game, like the old school games where, you know, there wasn't necessarily netcode in them, but they're still awesome. We'll be creating languages. Will you be getting a sockets netcode? We did that. How much time do you expect to be spending dealing with different ASM notations? None. I don't expect to actually do much ASM notation stuff. I'll just teach you basically how to read what's going on so you can kind of be comfortable with it, but we won't really belabor the point too much. Are you going to make the music for the game? No. I licensed music for the game. I already licensed music for the game, actually. The music is ready, and I'm in the process of trying to get art built for the game. Unfortunately, there's no way to just license art like there is a way to license music, so I had to find an artist, and I'm working with the artist now, and hopefully they will be interested in doing a fair bit of art for the game. But I'm basically going to see how that goes. Obviously, it's expensive, but I really wanted us to have art to work with, and I wanted the game to look good so that you would see that what we were doing for programming is as good as the best quality stuff that there is. We're not, you know, cutting corners or anything. And part of that is having nice art. I mean, if your art looks ugly, it's pretty hard to show off the code. Yeah, that's the bottom line. So let's see. Handmade here. Can you release any information about what kind of game it is to make? Monday. Monday, we will talk a little bit more about that. And on that live stream, at the beginning of that live stream on Monday, when I officially start the real stream, I will give a little explanation of what the game's going to be like. Are there any books you recommend to read along with the series? No. There might be good books out there, but I don't know what they are. I apologize. It's been a long time since I've read a programming book, so I don't know what the good books would be. And I'd be afraid to recommend something in case there's like kind of bad ideas in it. The game won't use the GPU, will it? Nutus wants to say. Not at first. So I want to avoid the GPU until potentially the very end because I want to show people how to do all the rendering themselves. The GPU will speed things up quite a bit from what we can do with only the central processor. But actually, like if you look at something like, say, for example, The Binding of Isaac, the original or Rebirth, I believe we could pretty much do CPU-based rendering for that, no problem. And those are fantastically popular games. Nobody seemed to have a problem with those in terms of the quality of the game that they were getting, except the Flash version's too slow. We could definitely outdo that. But I meant, you know, the Rebirth one where it's actually running at 60 frames a second. I think we can get, we might not get 60, maybe we'll get 30. And we might have to be a little lower res, but we can do it on the CPU. Now, later in the series, I probably will show how to bump it up to GPU rendering for speed purposes. But I'm hoping that we don't have to do that because I really want you to be able to see how all the rendering works. And as soon as you go into GPU land, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens behind your back. And not only behind your back, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens that you can't even know because it's confidential. You can't even know how it works. I can't even explain to you how it works because I might not even know because they may not ever have been something that they could tell me, for example. I know how the internals of some stuff work, but you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I don't know. So I kind of have to ask like someone from NVIDIA when I want to know a really nitty-gritty detail about something because I don't know what happens in those chips. And so I wanted to keep this series to all things that we could specifically see. Every pixel on the screen, we put it there, and we know exactly what happened to get it there. Not sort of, but exactly. Let's see. Why would you prefer Visual Studio Compiler instead of GCC since your plan is to create a standalone library in Pure C? Well, I'm used to using their debugger. I'm used to using the Visual Studio debugger because that's what the industry uses. And I wanted people to get used to using what the industry uses, at least for now, because I figure people who take this class might want a job in the game industry someday. And if they want a job in the game industry, they won't be using GCC on Windows. They'll be using this. When we are on Linux, which I will do a platform thing so you can see how to use on Linux, you'll be using LLVM, which is sort of the newer better way to do GCC compiles. So we will be addressing open source compilers, just not on the Windows platform. Let's see. What else we got here? We're running out of time. It's almost 2 hours. Looking through, and I'm not seeing. Are we recording this QA? Yes, the QA is always recorded and posted along with the video on YouTube. So if you go to handmadehero.org, in fact, I'll just demonstrate it for you. So if you go to handmadehero.org, you will see these buttons. I put the buttons here at the top that are the most important buttons. You can get to the Twitch stream quickly by doing this, and you can get to the archive. You can also email me a question, which will help when you get into things yourself. If you go to the archive, you will see that actually the Q&A from day one's already there. So you can always get to it this way. So yeah, I highly recommend that you check out the Q&As if you are looking for stuff, because I try to answer a bunch of the questions that I think are important. So. Paul 6 says, inheritance versus composition. We are way not at that point yet, Paul 6. We are going to hold that till later on. Nuta says, will you be the game designer? I thought you'd given up on design. Yes and yes, actually. Those are both true. And how can that be true? It's a good question. The answer is because I will be showing you how to make a game that is a very standard design. I am not a very good game designer, in my opinion, but I understand games well enough. I've been playing them for so long, and I understand basic game design stuff, so that if you want me to make something that's like, you know, The Legend of Zelda or something like that, I understand the important aspects there, and I won't mess it up. So what I'm doing here is not so much novel game design. It's more just like, make a competent action-adventure game. Right? Using the things that you know work in action-adventure games. I won't be branching out hugely. I won't be doing a bunch of things that no one's ever seen before. And oh my God, it made me cry, and I learned about my dog that has cancer. Like, none of that stuff will be happening, because I am not a game designer in that sense, and I don't pretend to know how to do those things. So I am just going with a very standard design, and I will be obviously also welcoming input from my game design friends who are very good game designers. I know plenty of people who are much better game designers than I am. So if I have any questions, they will be basically, you know, the people who sort of decide things like that. I will just ask for help if there's any design things. So the focus will always be on the code, and the design will be very straightforward. And I will, you know, basically get people's opinions who I trust to make any decisions that I feel like are too hard for someone like me, who's a game programmer, not a game developer. Let's see. Think of not having fixed sense arrays from your backup. Is your back right up to a window? Yes. I am scared of snipers and falling through the window, Shalnek. That is true. You know, the thing is, the snipers could get me walking down the street too, and I could get run over by a car. So the way I rationalize it is like, if a sniper's going to get me, they're going to get me, right? And in some sense, why even bother shooting me through the window, right? Like, I mean, it's harder to shoot through a window. You know, that's what I figure. So yeah, it's totally true. It is scary, but it's not as scary as every day, really. It's a dangerous world out there. Guns, they're dangerous. Is the way we are displaying graphics faster than using OpenGL as far as frame rates? No, it is actually slower than OpenGL. We will be taking a speed hit so that we can do it all ourselves. And then later I will show you how to also do it using the GPU pipeline. And you can compare the speeds, obviously. But we are basically going to be doing it the old school way, so people can learn how to render before they start using something like OpenGL. Because I think it's actually pretty important to know how to render before you start telling OpenGL how to do things that you want to render, because it really helps your understanding of even how OpenGL is working. Kenrick Beckett, how complex will the game be? The game is going to be very complex, actually. Most of what I want to spend time doing is I want to show you how to write an audio engine, I want to show you how to write a video engine, but then the majority of the code we're going to write for most of the series is I want to show you how to write very intricate game code and manage the complexity that comes out of it. So the game will be a lot more complex than most of the things you can buy in terms of the actual game design that's in there. It will not be, like something like Assassin's Creed or something, or Call of Duty, where there's tons of scripted sequences. It will not be complex in the art asset management and composition, but in terms of like the actual complexity of what you can do in the game, it will be vastly more complicated than something like Call of Duty, where basically all you can do is shoot stuff that they told you could shoot. So it is designed to be the plan I have for the game is that it is designed to basically force us to mostly deal with hard item interaction, environment interaction, entity interaction sorts of stuff, so you can see how that code works, because that is code that to me is very timeless, and that are conceptually things that you have to do no matter what programming language you learn in, and I want to show how to handle those in good ways and where the problems are and all that sort of stuff. Let's take a look here. When will the game be finished? A long time from now. Because I have to explain everything, I think it will take quite some time. So even though it's a 2D game, which means we don't have to deal with a lot of the 3D art pipeline stuff, which takes a lot of time, and the art wrangling will be more straightforward, because I'm explaining everything as I go, it's going to take a long time. I mean, expect several months before there is a interesting game to play at all, and then expect several months after that for us to really start getting into all the complexity and stuff, because I want to take it slow. Let's see. Yes, I should change the stream title. That's a very good point. Thank you, Ed Swanshaw, Twitch title. Okay, Andy Boy. Follow up on the \r\n question. Your opinion, was it a mistake for them to implement it in that fashion? That is, do you think they should have left it to the programmer to handle? Okay, so you basically wanted to know what I think of the fact that the C runtime library does that string translation. Well, honestly, I think the C runtime library is kind of crappy. I don't think it's crappy because the people who made it didn't know what they were doing. I think the people who are responsible for C in general are pretty awesome. And I think the C runtime library was probably actually pretty darn good for its time. I think nowadays it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, a lot of the things that they did, but those are all because the circumstances have changed. And we've learned a lot more about API design and things like this, and computers are a lot faster, so the different things matter. There's so many things that are there. So I really would hesitate to criticize something about the way the C runtime library is designed or what they did in there. And I don't really know the circumstances of when the \r\n thing came in. Obviously, the original C didn't run on Windows because Windows didn't exist. So that is a later thing anyway, and may not have even had anything to do with the people who originally designed it. But I don't want to second guess them because they, they wrote a language that has lasted for, decades, and it's pretty darn good even today. Let's see. Casey needs a mega timer. Yes, it is time for me to end. So I'm going to try and just blow through these last couple questions here. Will you share some of your tricks for doing metaprogramming in C? Probably not. That's way out of the scope of this thing. What should I say to my know-it-all programmer friends who say making a game in C is crazy? Tell them that's fine. Actually, if they think it's crazy, they should not do it. They should make it in C++. I don't think people should use things that they don't like. I would basically say that hopefully the stream will prove that you don't really need C++ to make a nice, good, clean game that runs great, reads great, and is easy to work with. And so I guess if you really want to come back at them, you could say, well, why don't you re-implement your own game in C++ as a live stream and we'll all watch and see how easy that is. I don't know. But no, I wouldn't, don't argue with people. One of the things that I learned a long time ago, programming-wise, is arguing just makes you less viable in the job market, basically. If someone else wants to program poorly, let them. That basically means you have more job security because you're the only person who won't be wasting all your time typing in templates and classes and doing inheritance. You'll actually be writing code that actually does useful things, and you will be more valuable to the company that you work for, or you'll be able to make a better game in less time. So, you can politely tell someone that they're probably wrong about something, but at the end of the day, unless you're just trying to let off steam, which I do as well, unless you're just trying to let off steam, don't bother arguing with them. Just let them continue to program incorrectly, and easier life for you. How much variation will be possible with everyone's game as the product progresses? I'm not sure what that means. Sorry. Maybe send me an email and I'll answer it later. How complex required will the math algorithm be? Okay, so the math will not be that complex because we're doing it in 2D, and I chose that specifically to try and reduce the math load and the content load. Hopefully because it's 2D, not that much math, but you will need to know things like sines and cosines, and we'll be doing some things with like ratios, and so there will be math involved, and I'll try to explain it as we go, but it definitely will help if you understand high school math. I probably won't bust out too much college level stuff. Hopefully we will not have to do anything really related to linear algebra or Diffie-Hughes and that sort of stuff. If I already know how to program, but I'm interested in the game programming sort of stuff, are you going to skip directly on the 17th, or is there some? Okay, so basically what he's asking is, should they start on the 17th if they already know how to program in C well enough? And the answer is, it depends whether you want to know the Windows startup process. The first week or two will just be basically me showing you how to code a thing in Windows that gets you into what I would call kind of the old days, which is a place where you could just write to an audio stream and a video surface and have them display. If you care about that, you should watch. If you don't care about that, you can skip it. After that, yes, we will be into the game code part of code. We will be doing stuff with rendering at various points, which you may not care about if you don't care about rendering, if you just only want game code. But I will try to tweet things that let you know what's going to happen, and maybe we'll try to come up with a good way of posting what's going to happen so that you can easily jump in and out if you don't care about certain parts of the stream. Because I do respect the fact that there are people out there who only want to see parts of it, and it's going to be a long series, so I'll try to facilitate that. Will the same code work for using Mac instead of Windows? Yes, although not for a little while. So basically, the problem is I don't have a way to really stream from Windows, from other platforms at the moment. I only can stream from Windows because I'm using the OBS thing. What I would like to do is somebody's get a box, and then I will do the startup code to show you how to do the same startup code that we're going to do on Windows on the Mac, and then all the same code will work. So there'll basically just be a little shim that goes on each operating system. And so hopefully people will be able to follow along on the Mac eventually, but not right away. I'm sorry about that. Let's see, last couple questions. Looks like we are basically done with questions. So I will wrap it up for the night. Thank you very much, everyone. 200 people, that's twice the people we had last night. That is crazy. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I had a great time, and I hope you enjoyed the stream. If you have anything that you would like to suggest, please go ahead and email me. If you go to handmadehero.org, there's that email button. You can send me an email. And I look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow night when we will go into a little more detail on assembly language and C code and how it relates to each other. And then we will finally be free to just code some C and take a look at it, which will get us in good shape for Monday's start. Okay, thanks everybody, and I will see you tomorrow.